There are a lot of stealth gameplay in tutorials on YouTube, but I find that when people talk about stealth, most of the time they refer to aggressive stealth where you go in, get the first strike benefit and clear the objective quickly before they can overwhelm you. Or they could be talking about marksman gameplay where they take out the enemies from afar without putting the enemies on alert. Or sometimes they just use stealth as a secondary component of their arsenal, going prone to avoid patrols or to lose their pursuers but then going loud as soon as they get to the objective area. What I want to talk about is how you can make your pocket strategy stealth as effective as possible. This kind is where you go inside the objective area and clear it right under the enemy's noses. But even though I would be preaching about how cool infiltration stealth is, I don't use this often. Why? Because it is inefficient. In Helldivers, you get a timer for every mission. The goal is to accomplish the objective, and optimally, you clear as much as you can during the time given to you. The more you accomplish, the more rewards you get, and in addition to that, your contribution points to liberating a planet is higher. This playstyle is incredibly slow, and it takes a lot of time and planning to execute correctly. If you simply go on the border of your objective, throw an airstrike, you get the job done in mere seconds, and by the time you leave, they might even call a bug breach or a bot drop, making it easier for you and your teammates to push into the next objectives while the enemy reinforcements are on cooldown. Killing all the enemies would make this area a safe zone too. You can clear your tasks without worry of enemy fire, and if you're playing a long-range playstyle, you don't even have to go in and put yourself in danger. This brings me to the second point, higher risk. Going in while not killing all the enemies means that you're putting yourself at such a high risk that it would only take one mistake until the enemies put you in the blender and everything just goes down the drain. Third, its success is often dictated with what enemies spawned in the location and where they're facing. As such, in most cases, it is not the best approach. There are, however, some moments when this would be the optimal approach to clearing your mission. For example, when you're playing solo, or if you're working separately with the rest of the team, you will be fighting with less firepower, and there will always be patrols that will spawn specifically to either cross paths on your destination or just mess you up wherever you are. If you're playing this kind of stealth, your primary goal is to avoid combat. That means not attracting the attention of the enemies in the objective, unless necessary, of course. You don't want to attract the patrols around, and you want to avoid enemy reinforcements. Since the goal is to clear objectives without combat as much as possible, this means that if you have not gotten or baited the bot trap or a bug breach before going in, you don't have to worry about that. Sometimes your team will be in a position where there's just waves and waves and waves of enemies, and by the time you've cleared them, you'll realize you spent 10 minutes just to take a light enemy spawn location. If your team gets in this kind of situation, the stealth diver can separate from the team, making sure that the enemies are not tracking them, and then clear the objective while their allies are taking the enemy's attention. There are actually some objectives that you can clear faster using infiltration compared to initiating any form of combat, especially in the bot front. Here are some examples. Obtaining launch codes for the ICBM launch, and you could also say the same for all of the associated tasks with that mission, but it's a case-by-case scenario. Destroying a detector tower, deactivating a jammer without any fabricators attached to them, or what you would call a hard jammer, blowing up orbital cannons, destroying bioprocessors, geological surveys, raising the democracy flag, although this one is quite tricky to perfect. It's not straightforward like the geological surveys. Clearing fortresses is also faster with stealth, and there might be more. Stealth also works with the terminates, but sometimes the game would spawn so many of them in the objective that it would be easier to just kill them instead of going for stealth. There are other benefits to an infiltration, like you can control enemy aggression. If you attack an enemy, it is possible that you will only alert those that are close to it. Thus, you can retreat a little, take out enemies one by one, making it very manageable to take an objective by yourself, no matter how many enemies there are inside the objective area. If you're in a bind, such as having low health, no stims, no ammo, no stratagems available, you just got reinforced and you don't have the necessary weapons to take on the enemy inside the objective, or your team is currently low on reinforcements, then infiltration stealth would be the best approach. Infiltration stealth is also not skill dependent, In fact, the real power of a stealth diver is their knowledge of the mechanics of the game and battlefield awareness. Your success depends on your decision making, not the ability to defeat your enemies as quick as possible. A stealth diver would know when and where to attack, what enemies and paths to go to, where to retreat, and even coordinate exceptionally well with the team, as they would be excellent scouts or supports. Again, I recommend that you master another playstyle before adding this to your arsenal, many of which would greatly improve your stealth tactics when you finally use it. For example, a run and gun approach helps you clear objectives fast, giving you ample time to use infiltration stealth when necessary. The ability to defend and hold a position will help you if you lose your cover, or perhaps you don't have the luxury of time to wait for a patrol to pass by, so you'd rather just clear the patrol quickly and get the job done. A marksman playstyle will mean that you can reduce the enemy quantity before going in, or if you're using, for example, the recoilless rifle to take out enemies from afar, you'd only need to infiltrate for a short amount of time to hit those targets that are hidden from you. In my opinion, the best stealth diver is someone that can shift playstyles whenever the situation demands for it, while having the capability to perform stealth when odds are against the team's favor. Before going in, I would recommend that you watch the following videos first. Number 1 is Aravin's Guide to Stealth, which teaches you the basics of stealth, the types of alert statuses, distance, sound, and sight mechanics, exceptions to these rules, and many more. And the second one is Lex's explanation to patrols. The link to both videos will be in the description below. Now that you know that, let's get to the actual guide. First, before going in, you have to decide, is this the best course of action? Like I said, it's not the most efficient, but there could be times when it's your only option or it's the better option. So first, check your stratagems. Do I have anything that will clear this faster? Would I rather reserve my stratagem to keep it from being on cooldown as I go to the next objective? An example would be if I could clear a clustered group of bots in this heavy outpost using my laser. Would I have anything to take out the command bunker that I will be heading to next? Number 2. Check your ally's position. Sometimes you don't have to take an objective alone. If an ally is close to your position, it might be easier and more efficient to just call for their aid and throw an orbital barrage in. If your team is trying to clear the map quickly and you think it would be better if they stay on their course rather than deviate and help you, then by all means, start the infiltration. Number 3. Is the risk worth it? It might be possible to just leave this objective for later if the conditions are not in your favor. If you've decided that you really need to go in, first check the reader. Are there patrols that would mess up my approach? How many enemies are there? Patrols might hear you shoot your weapon if you wanted to assassinate a target before going in. I don't have the exact number ready. Usually it's around 30 meters, but if you have a loud weapon, sometimes they detect you even if they're around 35 meters. Patrols may also disrupt your entry point, or it's possible that they are stuck inside the objective, especially if you've killed enemies already and they're walking on top of their corpses, or there are shrubs nearby. Sometimes they get stuck on those. Number 3. Are there any surrounding locations that might become trouble if I get too close? This could mean a nearby group of small enemies, a nearby base, or a nearby stalker lair. Sometimes you might be attacking an objective and all of a sudden you see this walker come by that came from another base. That happens sometimes. Plan your escape route. If you get chased, would there be somewhere you could run off to? Would you use a path to buy you some time as you retreat and clear your pursuers? Could there be a stalker lair nearby? A catchy fabricator? Are there small enemies around that I could use to bait a reinforcement call? Which, by the way, is quite common around primary objectives. I suggest you use them. Some might even provide you with optimal locations to bait, such as a minefield or an area that is separated to the objective with hard cover. A separation means that once the reinforcements arrive, you can make a run for it, and they would already have no line of sight of you, and you'd only need to buy a couple of seconds to lose them. A strategy that I always use is I sometimes leave one single enemy in a location that is far away from the objectives that I'm pursuing, and you will see this happen if you're playing bots often. A random location will just launch a bot drop even though no one is near it, and that's a cool way to have like a constant supply of a bot drop bait. I've noticed though that if you engage another enemy and they call the bot drop the previous lure, does not work anymore unless you go and alert them. So keep that in mind. All right, now you've decided to go in, check the radar. What's the next step? Survey the location. Your goals are: 1. Determine if it's possible to go in and clear your objective without even assassinating any enemy. So that means it's up to chance, depending on where the enemies are looking at. Are they looking at the terminal? Are they looking at your entry point? And all of that. If you're fighting bots, check if there are small bots that could call reinforcements. This means that if you need to start some combat, you'd have to prioritize these targets. If you're fighting bugs, check if there are heavies in the area such as chargers, impalers, and bile titans. You cannot assassinate these enemies without causing an alert, as the methods to kill them in one hit are all loud. The only way you could do that is probably if you're hitting them from afar, like really far, more than 50 meters. Make sure that no other enemies are near you, as they will start alerting patrols nearby or cause reinforcement calls as you take your shot. There will be times when the one that calls reinforcements is not part of that group that caught onto you, like in my example earlier. Next, determine which enemies you should kill. You don't have to assassinate every single enemy in the objective, just those that will break your cover once you go in. For example, enemies that are looking at the terminal would be one. Enemies that are looking at those previous enemies could be another, as performing a kill in front of them will alert the entire area. I highly recommend that you combine marksman strategies with your stealth, as knowing how far you could take out enemies even if they're near or looking at each other without any alerts is extremely helpful. And lastly, determine the order at which you'll take out the enemies. Step 4, execute. Step 5, get out. And that's it. Here are, however, some important tips that will be crucial to your stealth gameplay. Number 1, every time you kill an enemy, check the radar. You need to know if you've attracted unnecessary attention. Perhaps a patrol just spawned and is now heading to your location. A patrol that is near you might also hear your shot. And even though the enemies in the objective area remain unalerted, the patrol will home in on your location and call nearby patrols to converge and chase you down. It might also trigger a reinforcement call, and as I've mentioned earlier, the unit that calls the reinforcement need not be part of that group. They just have to be nearby and inherit the alert status. This is why you sometimes see enemies call reinforcements even though they don't have line of sight of you, or are put into soft alert before and they just happen to be around the area when the patrol spotted you. Number 2, every time you finish a task, check the radar. Patrols spawn super quickly, and if you watch the video I recommended that explained how patrols work, you'd know that staying in an objective area raises patrol heat. The longer you stay in there, the more frequent the patrols will come. In fact, check the radar as often as possible. There would be a lot of moments when you'd have to just hide and patiently wait for the patrol to pass by. Number 3, decrease patrol heat if necessary. This is why I recommended assassinating from afar. If you go in, you generate patrol heat and increase the patrol spawn frequency. If you stay far, patrols that spawn will triangulate to your location, leaving them out of the objective area, and it will give you the opportunity to go in without fear of the patrol hindering the process. If you've punched the terminal and is waiting for the process to be over, go out. Even if you do generate spawn patrols, they will head to your location outside of the objective area instead of going straight to the terminal. This will leave you the chance to go in once the process is done and perform the next steps. I believe that patrol spawns work like the ghosts in Pac-Man. Some are generated to walk ahead of you in an attempt to block your path. Some will be generated to roam the area, limiting your movement or catching you off guard if you decide to change directions. And some are spawned to walk straight to your current location. Number 4, if you're working as a duo, you can use a simple trick to make the enemies face your direction momentarily. All you have to do is stand up for half a second near an enemy, then immediately go prone. This will make enemies around you look in your direction. You should give the space for another Helldiver to perhaps cross behind them, or if you have a sniper ally behind you, take headshots as necessary. Unfortunately, you can't use this trick to make all enemies change direction of where they are facing to snipe their heads, as they will return to the default direction they were facing after a few seconds. It's also not a useful trick if you want to make them change their direction that they're looking at, if you want to infiltrate in a different entrance. because they will, like I said, they return back to where they were looking at before. Number 5, master the tools of the trade. Enemies will react to sound. If a patrol is headed your way, find a bit of cover and chuck a loud grenade away from you. This will redirect them and head to the source of the explosion instead. If you're using a weapon to create this, make sure that you're either far or you're using a quiet weapon like a grenade pistol or an explosive crossbow. If there are explosive barrels in the area, you can also destroy them from afar to distract the enemies momentarily, giving you a small breathing space to do your tasks. I've heard from a friend that sometimes you just have to be hidden. You take out the barrel and they won't know where you are, and they will head to the source of the explosion instead. I haven't tested this yet, as it's not my usual tactic. I did try using throwing knives at barrels, but they always magically know where I am. Maybe I have to hide quicker? I don't know. The throwing knife is an excellent stealth weapon. People say that it doesn't work if you're the host, but even if you are, or if you're playing solo, it's an excellent pick. All you have to know is you need to be accurate or you need to be fast. If you missed, the enemies in the area are not alerted immediately. You'll have a second or two to make the enemy flinch and throw more knives at them, avoiding the alert status. Throwing knives are also very quiet. Normally, if you shoot an enemy with a gun, the noise will alert everyone in a circular area around you and either look in your direction or chase immediately. This is really bad if there are patrols nearby. A throwing knife, on the other hand, does not create this sound. So if you're being chased, even if a patrol is nearby, you can freely chuck it at your pursuers without fear of them calling more enemies to your location. Quite an excellent strategy if you're trying to lose a patrol. It is also useful if you have a patrol nearby and they have a bot that might see you. If you can use a throwing knife to kill them before they see you, you might make the patrol ignore you. Take note that if the enemies or the patrol is in soft alert already, it will have the opposite effect. If you hit a guy, even if you killed the trooper, for example, the entire patrol will still know your location. They might not shoot at you immediately, but they would know where you are. So start running if that happens. You can experiment when and where to use the throwing knife. Smokes are excellent at disrupting enemies and giving you the time to perform a task quickly. Most stealth divers would say that smoke grenades are all you need, and while I don't necessarily agree or disagree, I do love smoke grenades as well, but having smoke as your stratagem gives you options to bring other useful grenades such as the stun grenades, the throwing knives, the termites, and they're quite useful. For example, throwing knives allows you to clear heavy pursuers while at the same time giving you the ability to destroy bug holes and fabricators from any angle. Stun grenades, an extension, the orbital EMS and EMS mortar lets you stop enemies in an area momentarily, giving you ample time to clear a task such as pushing the buttons on the terminal or destroying bug eggs. Having stun also means that you are useful during combat by providing support to your allies or to yourself, like stunning a charger to let you or an ally kill it with a rocket, or perhaps your group has decided to ambush a patrol, then you can launch a stun to ensure that they don't call reinforcements during the ambush and everyone can go ham on the enemy patrol. Do be careful of using smoke airstrikes, however, during your infiltration. There are moments when I'm infiltrating a fortress or an orbital cannon area and a smoke pod hit a fabricator and magically all enemies in the area knows where I am and the bot drop flare is immediately shot up. Orbital smokes are handy if you just need to smoke a large area and go in. Aside from opening up your grenade slots, sometimes you just need to smoke once to get the job done. For example, you just need to put a hell bomb on a spore spewer. There's no need to use multiple smokes, you only need one smoke to do it. The cooldown is also quite short, to the point that it will be available as soon as you get to your next objective, and perhaps on the next objective if you've rushed the next one to where you're currently at. Smoke grenades, however, are useful for multi-step infiltrations like the orbital cannon objective, for example. Sentries make for excellent distractions. I remember always using the mortar sentries on destroy bug eggs missions where I put it outside the area, and once it starts dropping shells, enemies will rush out while I'm prone nearby, waiting for my opportunity to go in uncontested. You can also use long-range sentries like the autocannon or the rocket sentries to pull the enemies away from the objective area and then give you the space to go in, while at the same time reducing the number of enemies that will go back in once they've destroyed the sentry. If you're using this strategy, I also recommend that you lure a reinforcement call somewhere else first. You don't want a bug breach while you're trapped inside the objective area. Believe me, I've learned that the hard way. Having sentries in your stratagem list will also allow you to play more aggressively, holding a location where you or your team are at an advantage, giving you the option that if you feel like things are about to get bad, you can use a distraction to flee and then infiltrate while the objective area is empty. Someone in the Discord server where I was at taught me this strategy. Quite useful, I might say. During stealth operations, you'd find that you have some mortal enemies as a stealth player, and these are gunships that are spawned from gunship fabricators, stalkers, the trooper that is equipped with true swords, and sometimes they commissar the MG trooper or the rocket trooper, but most of the time it's the guy with the two swords. That is a bigger problem. So why are they your mortal enemies? Gunship fabricators and stalkers ignore line of sight and instead work with a perimeter alert. As soon as you get near, they hone in on your location, no matter how stealthily you play. Eliminate these threats as soon as possible. If you have the UAV booster, you might be able to avoid gunships if you spot them far enough. Dive prone and immediately hide. You can also lose gunships if they don't have a line of sight of you for a couple of seconds. But if there are multiple in the area, you better start running and dodging if you can't eliminate them. And for moments, you might be heavily surrounded by enemies without cover, or you don't have the proper equipment to take the gunships out, then run. I highly recommend, if you don't have anything to take them out, run away from the range of the fabricator, which is, I believe, around 160 meters. And then that's when you start hiding. If you hid below that range, then you're still in range of the fabricator, and every time they release a new gunship, the gunship knows where you are. So it's better to stop the spawn first. And once you're well equipped to deal with them, then that's when you take out the fabricator. Flamer Hawks, once they've been alerted once, have an ability to permanently detect where you are. But at the same time, it's weird because they can't obtain the alert status. So they'll just stand there and they're gonna face you wherever they can see you, if they can. Even if they're not looking at you yet, they will turn around and look at you. It's a weird, I don't know if it's a bug. But however, this makes assassination difficult as they will always see you perform the deed. They obtain the status in two cases most of the time. One, they hear you and made the scan, and after scanning but you're not close enough, then that sends them into a soft alert. Maybe not yet, because in soft alert they kind of in a semi-aggressive state, but they made the scan, they didn't detect you, they're not alerted, but they will have this buff, they will always like know where you are, but they're not alerted. So they're not chasing you or anything. It's weird. The second method is if they were previously chasing you and lost line of sight of you. So basically they're on high alert, then they went to soft alert after losing you. Then it might send them into a frenzy instead, which they would like hammer away indefinitely in the ground until they sense you again. Or, you know, they get the status where they're just standing there knowing where you are, but they're not pursuing you unless you go near them. The second method is preferable because sometimes if they're like hammering on the ground, they might eventually move out of the area, and sometimes they might take out some enemies along the way, which is really cool. If you want to remove this from them, of course the best strategy is to just kill them, or you could leave, at which point they will lose their guard identity and they are classified like a patrol or a bot trap, then they will despawn, which is, I don't know, it's another bug, but they do despawn when I go back. Or if they did not despawn, they don't have this ability anymore, but most often than not they disappear. Or you could try luring them away by letting them chase you, and then if they lose line of sight of you, they will stay in their spot, and even if they know where you are, you can clear your objective even if he's looking at you. Just like stay from afar. However, patrols can inherit this alert status if they pass in front of the Hulk, so be careful because that will make the patrol head straight to your location. Enemy mortars can be silenced by going prone, avoiding several shells, and just waiting or crawling to the where you want to go next. But keep an eye on those shells. Sometimes as soon as I run, the mortars detect me again, sometimes they don't. I have yet to figure the exact triggers for them. Next, master which movements create sound that enemies can detect. For example, flipping on a rock could be one, and getting ragdolled and standing up near enemies could be another. If you dove and hit some other object, it could trigger sound. Loading destructible objects, if you're the one that initiated it, will catch the enemy's attention. If you're not the one that made the object explode, it will not trigger them. There are some noises that don't attract enemies despite how loud they are. So one thing to keep in mind is the enemies detect sound different to how you detect sound, like a person is coded differently in the game. For example, a smoke grenade or smoke orbital is quite loud. Reloading is loud, but they do not attract the enemies. They're considered as quiet. It's hard to explain, but I'm sure you get the point. The sound of your secondary weapons tend to be less detected, despite how loud some of them can be, like the Senator. Diving, which is also loud, tends to be quiet and undetected unless you like ragdolled. Some enemies are quite sharp at detecting this, like the guy with a dual sword, and they don't need a line of sight to chase you. They just have to sense you like standing up somewhere, and they already know where you are. They don't attack you immediately. They still need to actually see you before initiating combat or you firing at them, so you can have the opportunity to run or throw a throwing knife at them. Another strategy is you could run away, get out of line of sight, and then dive. Check if the enemies are still pursuing you. Sometimes, as soon as you dove down, it will make them stop in their tracks, and then they will either return to where they came from or they start searching for you in the area. But it's one of the strategies that I use often to lose my pursuers, because you can do that like even if you're near them. You just have to find a hard cover and then dive. Make sure to use the radar. Don't just rely on the dive. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It usually depends on how long they have seen you or what made them chase you in the first place. If they were alerted, like they made the scan, but you were able to get out of that range, but when they made the scan, they stopped, then they will continue following you even if you lose line of sight of them. But if they heard you, they didn't see you, sometimes the diving into cover and just waiting works. So experiment with this. It sounds like there's a lot of things to keep note when doing stealth, but when you do it every single time or every day, all of this becomes second nature to you. Just keep diving and practicing. My last tip would be very careful when escaping, as enemies that are on full alert in hunt mode will share the straight on standing guards if they pass in front of them. Sometimes they just need to see the bullets whiz past their faces to inherit the alert status, and they might even call a bot drop, so be careful. So that is mostly the infiltration stealth tips that I have. If I have more, I'll probably make another video. It would probably have the same level of effort as this one, so that means not much, but I don't think you can find some of these tips anywhere else. So you get what you get. I'm sorry. I did my best, or not really my best, but with what I can do.